In this episode of the Soul Method podcast, we do have some adult language. So if you have little ones around, grab your headphones now. Hello, everyone. This is Joelle Fawcett, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Soul Method podcast.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for
Hello,
traffic.
everyone, and welcome back. It has been a minute since I have recorded a podcast episode, and I am so excited to be back with Season 2 of the Soul Method podcast. I am your host and the founder of the Soul Method. My name is Joelle Fawcett, and here at the Soul Method, our mission is to be your guide to heal from the past, be at peace in the present, and create a future you love. And we covered some serious ground in Season 1 of this podcast. So if you didn't listen to it, I'll tell you now, I highly recommend going back and listening to Season 1 of the podcast. And the reason for that is because it provides the groundwork, the foundation for a lot of the things that we are going to build on in Season 2. So I'm really excited. It has been a crazy, about, 6 weeks now since I have released a podcast episode. In that time, Joe and I moved. We are now in a single location, which is wonderful. And if you have ever moved, which I'm pretty sure if you are over the age of 12 listening to this podcast, you have probably moved once in your life and you know it is decently chaotic. So I took a little bit of time away from recording to be able to walk through that process with as much grace as I possibly could. And like I said, I'm super grateful and glad to be back here with you now. And I do have to give a huge shout out to all of our friends and family who helped us move, whether it was the team of amazing friends and family who physically helped us move all of our shit, whether it was the people in our lives who gave us the things we actually needed. Um, Thanks, Mom. You're awesome. Or if you were an emotional support person for me, helping me not fall apart completely in the stress and chaos that always occurs in these types of situations. Thank you. Dearest friend, you know who you are. And coming out of this experience, I really wanted to talk about what came up for me kind of on a bigger scale, because I've noticed this pattern in general, just in life. However, this experience really kind of magnified it for me. And I wanted to talk about it to start out our Season 2 of the Soul Method podcast. And this episode is titled, Are You Sure? So we're going to get into that. So, the baseline. Why is this episode titled, Are You Sure? Beyond the chaos of physically moving with 2 kids, Joe and I had to deal with the fact that this dynamic of moving in with each other in a new location is going to completely reorient our relationship in every facet possible. And here's the fact. Any change in our lives is going to bring up some kind of trauma response. Any kind of change. Sometimes that trauma response when we're triggered, it's very little. Someone cuts us off on the road and we flip them the bird. That's actually, if you're responding to something like that out of anger and frustration and don't have the emotional capacity to give that person a minute of a breather, you're probably responding out of a trauma response, out of some type of frustration that has nothing to do with the fact that a car cut you off. So sometimes it could be something super little like that that happens, and we react out of something that has happened in our past, right? Or something big happens, whether it's positive or negative. I have been so excited to create an actual home with Joe. It has been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for months. And when we first put out to the universe that we wanted to find a living space together, Spirit immediately told me that we would not be going about this in the traditional way. This is not going to be a thing where we go house hunting or apartment hunting and find some stranger who owns some piece of land or some space and sign a lease and go through all of the paperwork, all the stuff. I knew that it would be as easy as breathing if we could wait, if we could walk through the process the way that it was designed for us and trust that the absolute perfect place would be made manifest for us. So I will tell you that story in this podcast. It's pretty amazing. And that's really what we wanted. We wanted to find a place where we didn't have to go through the financial jungle gym of all of the paperwork, of being house poor, where the only space that we can find where we aren't going to drive each other crazy is too expensive for us, or settle for a space that is too small and we wind up living on top of each other, which neither of us wanted either. And there were a multitude of things that we both really, really wanted in a space. And we looked at our list of what we wanted and we looked at, the reality of what renting a space in our area looks like right now. And we were like, ooh, in the human world, those two things don't go together. But I know that in the spirit world, of course, those two things go together because anything is possible. So we began our manifesting journey with that. And I am excited to say that we have manifested everything that was promised to us. And it is just one more piece of proof to me that not only are we on the right path, but that it's real. And you guys are probably going to laugh when I say that. It's like, of course, like, doesn't she believe in what she talks about? But here's the thing, like, even still, even after I've been doing this for years and witnessed so many miraculous things, it still is incredibly rewarding and incredibly satisfying because I'm still human. I still have doubt. As little as it is, it still creeps in. So, this space that we are in now is absolutely amazing. I promise at some point I will jump on Facebook and give you guys a video tour. Joe bought me a new desk. He truly knows the way to my heart. Anything that has to do with writing or books, right to my heart. So, he's a total hero for doing that for me. And I'm excited to be here with you guys. So, around this episode, are you sure? So, like I was saying, anytime there is change in our lives, something happen, anytime something happens, we are going to respond in one way or another. It could either be a trauma response, a trigger reflex, emotional response. It could be a positive response. But most often, what we are responding to is the universe asking us, are you sure? So we're going to go backwards just to cover a little bit of ground, and then we're going to get into this. And like I talked about when I was briefly describing manifesting this home for me and Joe and my two kids, that manifestation comes out of the firm belief which is the basis for this episode and for the entire podcast itself, which is that whatever that thing out there is, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't care what you call it. Okay. You can call it goddess, God, universe, spirit, whatever works for you. Give it a name, doesn't matter. That thing out there is not just for you because it is. It is for you. It is in your best interests. It has your best interests at heart. It's not just for you, but it also has a perfect plan for you. Spirit is what planted the gifts and desires in your heart. Those things that light you up, the things that excite you, those were placed there and designed by Spirit. Like, side note, did you know that the word desire actually means of the Father? All of those things that are in you that you feel called to in your life, the things you feel called to change about this world, to write, to play in, to build, all of those dreams were planted there by the Great Spirit that knitted together this perfect universe. Because once again, you guys know me, I don't believe in coincidences, and I certainly don't believe for a second that anything in this world is an accident. Not the shape of the leaves, not the animals, not the stars, and certainly not you. You are here for a purpose, and that purpose is to make manifest all of the greatest dreams and desires that have been planted in your heart. Those things that bring you to life, the things that excite you, the things you love, that light you up. That is Spirit's plan for you. All of those things are going to take you back to love. And like I talked about in season 1 of this podcast, that is the ultimate design of the universe, is to take you out of fear, out of that illusion, out of that separation, and back to that state of pure love and manifest those desires that are in your heart. Now, the universe will use every single situation in your life to help you grow further and more deeply into you, to become this version of yourself so you can make manifest the plan that Spirit has planted in your heart. Spirit is not ambivalent, it's not uncaring, and it's certainly not distant. The Spirit that created all of the galaxies in the universe created you and created you with a plan and a purpose that I believe at some cosmic level we agreed to when we were born in this body at this time on this earth. It's our assignment. Every relationship, every occurrence, every challenge, and every achievement is designed as an opportunity for you and I to step into that great cosmic plan. And again, why? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the plan? When we were born as infants, we were born into love, into a perfect state. And somewhere along the way, our ego, that fear, that tiny mad idea enters us. And we start to separate from that state of perfect love. The more we return to those perfect pieces of our heart, the more we return to that state of love, the more we make manifest the ultimate existence of God here on earth. In the book and the musical Les Mis, there is a famous line that is sung or read that says, "To love another person is to see the face of God." And this is so incredibly true. But it's not true because of the person you're looking at. It's true because of the state of love in you. So, from this mindset, from this baseline and perimeter, I'm going to ask you to shift your perspective. Yes, the whole thing. I'm going to ask you to do something kind of crazy and shift your entire perspective on your life. What if all of the things that have happened, all the shit, all the failures, the setbacks, the wins, triumphs, the cars that broke down, the bonuses at work, the things that didn't work out, the marriages that fell apart, the family members that passed too soon, the turkey that burned on Thanksgiving, what if it is not done by the universe to hurt you? What if it's not done to shame you or to get back at you in some form of strange galactic revenge? What if these events are there for you? Because without them, you would never have the opportunity to run into the roar, like I talked about in the last episode of season 1. You would never have the chance to grow into the person you must be to return to love. And I bet you can guess what the number one tool the universe uses to bring you back to that state of love. It is experienced by every single person on the planet. And I can guarantee you that every single person does not like it. That tool is called change. And it's that moment I want to get into today. That moment when change happens in your life and the universe asks you, are you sure? Are you sure you want to be sober? Are you sure you want to work out? Are you sure you want to accomplish that thing? Are you sure you want to be committed to him or her? That thing you've said you've always wanted to do, that trip you've said you've always wanted to go on, that child you've said you've always wanted to have. Are you really sure? Remember, as humans, we have the habit of defining success as what we are doing or where we are going. Spirit does no such thing. Instead, spirit is focused on who we are becoming. Success, according to spirit, is living an authentic and self realized life. And that self realized life will always be based on love and the deepest, most sacred parts of our heart. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because all of this just happened in my life in many different ways, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, both around me and to me. So, when we make a commitment in our lives, literally any kind of commitment, cosmic forces will always ask you that question. Are you sure? Are you really sure? The incredible author Stephen Pressfield calls this cosmic force resistance. And you can call it whatever you want, like I've talked about, but make no mistake, it is always there. Pressfield says, quote, "The more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we'll feel towards pursuing it." Pressfield makes clear that this force of resistance is not a negative thing. It is a necessary thing. It's not personal. It's not there to hurt you. It is there to test you. So basically, any act that steps out of comfort and safety is going to attract this cosmic question to you. Are you sure? Unfortunately, most of the time, this resistance results in people quitting rather than pressing in. So think about a time in your life recently when you said you were going to do something. You were going to do X. I'll use like literally the most basic example of working out because Again, if you're over the age of 12, you've probably made that commitment on New Year's one year or another in your life. And if you have never made that goal at some point in your life, you are either a lazy bastard or you're a fucking unicorn. And in which case, you don't need this podcast. So I'm sincerely jealous. Have an amazing life. Now, first off, you must know that proclaiming you are going to do something, setting an intention in words, is a statement to the universe itself. Words are incredibly powerful, as I've talked about before. And when you say you're going to do something, the universe will take you seriously. And for those of you who are my friends, so will I, for that matter. For those of you who know me, you know that nothing irritates me more than somebody who cannot rise to the level of most basic integrity by simply doing what they say they are going to do. Now, I say simply with a bit of irony here because committing to living by the integrity of your words is absolutely one of the most challenging things in the world to do, but it will absolutely change your life. Why? Because this commitment enables you to trust yourself. You cannot trust yourself if you cannot count on your ability to speak truth about you. That will definitely be a future episode. And ironically, this is actually why they call the writing or speaking of words spelling. It's a reference to casting spells over your life. That is how powerful words are. So even if you aren't going to take yourself seriously, trust me, your subconscious and the universe most definitely will. Now, regarding our example, you all know that I'm a yoga teacher. I absolutely love yoga, dance. I do a lot of running, all of this stuff. And before becoming a yoga teacher, I was a dance teacher. And I will never forget the moment when I was teaching some of my adult students a few years ago. And one of them mentioned something along the lines of, she just keeps going, or how is she not exhausted? I literally stopped the class and said, hold up, hold up, hold up. You all know that this is uncomfortable for me too, right? And it was interesting in that moment because I don't think they actually did. I think that they thought that I wasn't exhausted or I wasn't hurting or I didn't want to stop just because my face was composed and I was leading the class. But that absolutely was not true. I was sweaty and gross and tired, and my legs were burning on fire. And I explained to them that I may not look like I'm wiped out, but that's only because I have so familiarized myself with that experience. The feeling of physical exhaustion from dance or yoga is so incredibly familiar to me that I actually look forward to it now. I actually need that level of exhaustion in a workout that I do, or else I kind of feel like it wasn't worth it. But at first, that feeling was so incredibly uncomfortable that if I hadn't been able to meet the question of the universe, are you sure? You were sure when you committed, when you were comfortable, but now that you're hurting, are you sure? Are you willing to press in? Are you willing to go through it to the other side, to the place where all of this change, all of this growth becomes the place where you live? A more recent example from my life would be I have a best friend who is amazing, and he had wanted to start to get into working out more and being healthier and, all the things. And he was like, hey, like, if I don't want to do this, like, kick me in my butt a little bit, like, don't let me not do this. So we've been keeping each other accountable with what we say we're going to do that day, whether it's me going for a run or doing a yoga class or whatever it is, we give each other a hard time if the other person wants to bail. And I had asked him before I had agreed to this, like, are you really sure? Because here's the thing, like, you guys know me, I am a blunt bitch. I don't hold back. And if someone is volunteering for me to get in their face about being accountable for stuff, I'm not nice about it. So he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, like, I really need it. I need somebody to kick my butt to tell me to make sure things happen. And I said, okay. So things started off really good, and they always do, right? When we start a new commitment, we start a new program, we start making our way towards a new goal. The first part is usually easy because we have this motivation from the excitement of stepping into that place. It's new, it's different. That motivation we have gives us momentum at first. And then, as you can imagine, we got a few days in, and one night he sends me a text message and says, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable. There's this stuff going on with my health. I got this going on. I got that going on. And this is not feeling so great to me. And now, granted, my disclaimer to this is that I am a yoga teacher, I am a dance teacher. I do have a very good sense as to when a situation is unhealthy in the sense where, oh, you shouldn't work out on that or you shouldn't be doing this. Like, you actually need to rest versus when someone is just making excuses and bitching. And we were definitely in the latter camp. And he said, yeah, like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this tonight. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to throw this out there. You know, are you going to let the pain stop you? Because, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. Let's just acknowledge that. Anytime you're going through change, and again, working out is one of the easiest analogies to use in this situation. Anytime you're going through change and you want to accomplish something and you are taking steps along the path that you know you are supposed to be on, you're going to encounter pain. It is going to be uncomfortable. And in that moment, the universe is asking you, are you sure? Are you really sure you want to do this? Because you wanted to do it when you were comfortable, when you had motivation, when the sun was shining, when you had caffeine in your system, when you had the energy, you said yes. But now it's dark outside. It's 11 p.m. You're tired. You have to wake up at 6 a.m. the next day. And there's a lot of lactic acid left over from yesterday. Are you really sure? And his response in that moment was, well, when you put it that way, and I knew he went ahead and stayed committed to the plan. But sometimes you really need that. And that's really why I think when you have a partner, whether it's a friend or a coach or somebody who's helping you walk through a process on being committed to doing what you say you're going to do, that's why it's so much easier because sometimes you really do need someone to remind you of the reality of the situation so you don't get stuck in the excuses in your head, right? So, really ask yourself when you are committing to a new goal or pivoting directions in your life or standing in a new place, engaging with people from a new place in your life, what would stop you? When you say you're going to do something, is there a line at which you would fold? At what point do you stop? How much does it have to hurt for you to quit? Because I can promise you, if you have one, if that line exists, if you have a contingency plan, the universe will find it. Two notes I will make on this is that number one, obviously, we need to be discerning. There's a very clear distinction between making an excuse and legitimately knowing you need to pivot within your commitment. So, with working out, if someone legitimately is at the point where they are facing injury, if they do something, obviously that's not a good idea. And that is called discernment. That is being in alignment with what your body needs and taking care of yourself. And that is far different than being uncomfortable and making excuses. So that is note number one. Number two is the reality that this is not a perfection game. When the universe asks you, are you sure? And things don't go the way that you want, now suddenly this is how it turns into a blame and a shame game. And you get to beat yourself over the back with a whip and say mea culpa for weeks and weeks. Okay? That's not the direction we want to go. Every single person on the planet has been unsuccessful in this, right? There is no person walking the earth who has not chosen comfort over pushing into a commitment or a goal at some point in their life. So don't go to the place of self judgment if you choose comfort in that moment. We are constantly being asked by the universe, are you sure? It's not a one and done thing. You can always recommit yourself to something at any point. Okay. For me, this has really come to the forefront of my mind because of this recent move in with Joe. And like I talked about before, big change always equals some kind of response. And it's never about this thing, right? Moving is not just about moving, it's all the junk it dredges up with it. And it's a positive thing, right? Joe and I have been looking forward to this for a long time. And it's still dredged up a lot of stuff for both of us. And it gives us the wonderful opportunity to work through it and confirm our commitment to us individually being who we are and us being who we are in relationship. And just to clarify, commitment here means literally where you stand, where you are committed to standing in every interaction you have with other people and energetically on this earth. It is who you have decided to be. And please make no mistake, you have chosen who you are, whether you are aware of it or not. How you show up in the world and how you allow others to show up in your life is 100% your responsibility. So imagine the last time your routine changed or something happened out of the blue. Maybe it wasn't even big. And you can think of something that at the time you felt was positive or negative. Remember, they're just things that happen. They in themselves are not positive or negative. They just are. So some examples might be maybe an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend called you out of the blue. Maybe your kid had to go to the hospital. Maybe you got a promotion at work. Maybe you made a commitment to be more patient, more kind, more caring, etc., etc. Maybe you took the first step to chasing that big dream that is in your heart. When this happened, what came up for you? My guess is that if it was a positive choice, a positive step, that, like with my friend, it was great for about 24 to 72 hours. But then the reality of our commitments set in, and the universe asks, are you sure? At your new role at work, suddenly your workload doubles. Are you sure you want this? You chose to show up more patient to your kid, and immediately she throws a temper tantrum. Are you sure? You took the first step to that big dream, and suddenly watching Netflix seems way easier. Are you really sure? Do you re engage in a relationship you've said no to? Are you sure you were done with that? Can you create the emotional capacity to be present in a hospital situation or an emergency situation? Are you sure? Are you really done? Are you really committed to doing this and being this person? With moving, it wasn't the physical moving of spaces. It was about me. Just like the promotion at work, the ex calling you, the step you took to the big dream. It's not about the thing or the other person. It's about you. Here I am, moving in with a man I love and I know was manifested in my life as my person. Remember, I called him in. If you haven't listened to season 1, where I tell the story of how I worked with my coach to manifest this relationship, go ahead and listen to it. It's an awesome story, or at least I think so, of course. And so here I am moving in with a man I love. And immediately I am encountered with every ounce of undealt with trauma from every past relationship I've ever had. When I was manifesting my relationship with Joe, I dug my heels in the ground and got really committed to several ways that I wanted to show up in the world and specifically show up in my relationship with my partner who would be coming into my life. Some of these commitments that I made were not taking him or her or anyone else in my life personally, the willingness to be vulnerable and authentic, and committed to sorting through and discerning what I need to deal with. So if I get upset about something, acknowledging where it's me and I need to deal with the stuff that's coming up for me versus needing to make a request from a clean place, from an emotionally healthy place. And I was very committed to using my words. So, if you know my story that I share in the first episode of the SoL.method, I talk about how I had this habit in the past of saying yes when I meant no and no when I meant yes, and this inability to speak authentically and stand in my truth. And in this process of working with my coach and also preparing to manifest my person, I became incredibly committed to never doing that again. The commitment was to say yes when meant yes and no when I meant no. And Joe and I move in together, and immediately all of these things are stirred up. All of the residual junk comes up, and the universe asks me, are you sure? Are you sure you're going to use your words when he leaves his clothes next to the hamper instead of in the hamper? Like, are you actually going to make a request around that? Or are you going to just let your ego get out of control in your head and develop resentment like you did for 10 years when you were married? Are you going to be honest with him about what you're afraid about? That you're afraid that you will fall into bad habits when you live with someone, that you won't be able to maintain your alignment? Are you going to take him personally? Are you going to make it all about you when he is just living his life? Are you really sure you're committed to these things? Right? And I'm sure you can imagine times in your life when it's been the same way. When you make a commitment and immediately upon a change, or maybe it's 2, 3 years later, the universe knocks at your door and says, hey, remember when you said that? Remember all that time ago when you said you were going to do this? Are you really sure? Remember when you said you were done with codependent and toxic relationships because that person over there, that person looks like a really hot body that covers a whole lot of toxicity. Are you sure you're done? Hey, when you said you were done with yelling at your kids and then your daughter spills her juice on your new shirt, are you sure you're done? Hey, remember when you said you were going to get committed to that big dream that was placed in your heart, but now you're tired, it's dark, and all you really want to do is snuggle up and watch Netflix? Are you really sure? One thing that I can promise you, and this is probably the most profound thing that I've experienced in the past few weeks of processing through everything that has come up. And it was such a good reminder to me because I had forgotten. And that is when the energy builds inside of you and you can feel the tension in your chest and you know it has to go somewhere, you have to release it somehow. And it feels like a mountain. It feels so insurmountable and you're scared. You're scared to be vulnerable. You're scared to say the thing. You're scared to dive into that feeling. You're scared to take the step. And make no mistake, everyone resists leaning into that. Everyone resists leaning into that tension that they feel. And most of the time, we instead push it down with excuses, with sugar or alcohol, or with sleep. So please make no mistake. Everyone feels this way, and 99.9% of the time, we are trained to disregard it and instead use other methods of distraction so we don't lean into and actually feel what is going on with us. What I had forgotten is that the moment I was willing to lean into that, which for me looked like a conversation with Joe where I was vulnerable and authentic and shared the way I was feeling from a responsible place. And that means there was no blame involved, where I went to him and said, "Hey, I really need to just share what's going on for me. And I'm not asking you to change it all, but are you able to be there for me in this moment?" And the miracle was that he said, "Absolutely. You can tell me anything." And immediately the tension dissolved. Immediately, all of the junk that had been built up washed away. And by leaning into that resistance, my relationship with Joe now is stronger than it ever has been. And that's what happens with this all the time. When the universe asks you, "Are you sure?" you have that choice to either make excuses, mask, and run away. Or if you lean in, what happens is that the tension resolves and suddenly your commitment to that person, that thing, that dream, whatever it is, that state of being becomes easier and lighter and even deeper than it ever had been before. Unfortunately, in our culture today, we are taught exactly the opposite. And before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to talk about this that we are taught to read the vibes of a situation or trust our emotions instead of trusting our commitment. And advice will be passed around saying, "Well, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it." And anytime I hear somebody say this, I can't help but laugh because at the end of the day, none of the important things in life are ever going to feel good when you're doing them. None of the things that are going to transform you into the person you are designed to be are going to be done from the circle of comfortable, safe, and all those good, happy vibes. Every time I do yoga, it's uncomfortable. Every time I lean into my relationship with Joe, it is uncomfortable. Every time I have to teach my kids a hard lesson about boundaries or relationships or doing things that they don't want to do, it's uncomfortable. And other parents out there, you can relate to me. right? Like, we love our kids, we want to spoil them. And every part of me wants to let my kids watch movies all day and eat ice cream for breakfast, but that's not being a responsible parent, right? All of the things in your life that are worth doing will challenge you and will feel uncomfortable when the universe comes up and asks you, are you sure? How committed are you really? And if you listen to what our culture teaches you, that's the moment when you quit. That's the moment when you make an excuse, when you say, oh, well, I wasn't really feeling it. That's the moment where resistance wins. Don't let it. And this is why I will always tell people that you need a coach. I don't believe that we are designed to do this life on our own. I don't think that we grow into who we are supposed to be if we live in a vacuum. And I have made that mistake far too many times in my life where I think I can do it all by myself. And the reality is that no one can. Everyone needs the people in their lives who are going to listen, who are going to sympathize, and who are going to help you get up, dust off, and charge on. And I have several people in my life who do that for me. Some of them are professionals, like my coach. Others of them are just incredible and amazing dear friends. And of course, my person. So, with that, we are going to bring this first episode of season 2 to a close. And like I had talked about, I am so incredibly excited to be here in this new space with you guys. I am excited for what season 2 has to bring. I will be having guests on the podcast for the first time, which will be amazing. We are going to dive into all sorts of different topics. And as always, I would love to hear from you. You can hit me up on the Soul Method Facebook page, which is at the Soul Method Yoga, or email me at Joelle, Joelle, at the.SoL.method.com. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week. Until next time.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic.